Imagine this, in the heart of a brutal Russian winter, high on a remote mountain slope, a tent is found completely abandoned. It's been sliced open from the inside. The 9 experienced hikers who were sleeping there are gone. They've fled into a frozen nightmare, into temperatures plunging to 30 below zero, some without shoes, some with barely any clothes on. When their bodies are finally found, the mystery only gets stranger. They have bizarre and violent injuries, crushed ribs, a fractured skull, and one of the women is missing her tongue. There are no footprints but their own, and no signs of a struggle, leaving behind a creepy murder mystery where the only explanation seems to be impossible. What could have driven 9 seasoned mountaineers to run to their deaths? And why does the official story in this true crime enigma only create more questions? Let's go back to the beginning. January 1959, in the Soviet Union. A group of 10 young, ambitious hikers, most of them students at the Ural Polytechnic Institute, were getting ready for the adventure of a lifetime. Their leader was 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, skilled outdoorsman known for taking on tough expeditions. This trek was a Category 3, the most difficult certification in the Soviet Union at the time, which shows just how skilled and tough this group was. Their goal was a mountain called Ototen, a name that in the local Mansi language ominously means don't go there. From the photos and journals they left behind, the group was full of life. They were laughing, building snowmen, and documenting their tough but amazing journey through the endless white wilderness. But early on, one member, Yuri Yudin, had to turn back because of severe joint pain. He was disappointed, of course, but that decision would accidentally save his life. He said goodbye to his 9 friends with no idea he'd be the last person to ever see them alive. The remaining 7 men and 2 women pushed on, deeper into the desolate heart of Ural Mountains. On February 1st, the group started their climb up Kolachiakol, which translates to Dead Mountain. The weather was getting worse. With hurricane-force winds and blinding snow, they strayed from their planned route and set up camp on an exposed slope. This was a strange choice for such an experienced group. They had to have known that a spot in the forest just a mile away would have offered much better protection from the wind and snow, but their final journal entries don't show any signs of panic or distress. They ate their dinner and got ready for bed, seemingly clueless about the terror that was waiting for them. Weeks went by with no word. When the hikers didn't show up at their destination by February 20th, search parties were sent out. On February 26th, a search team finally found the abandoned campsite on Dead Mountain. The scene was deeply unsettling. The tent was half buried in snow and had been slashed open with a knife. But from the inside, it was obvious that whoever was in there had to get out, and fast. Almost all the group's belongings, their clothes, shoes and food, were still inside the tent, but the hikers were gone. A trail of footprints, some from bare feet, some from just socks, led away from the tent and down the slope towards the tree line nearly a mile away. There was no sign of a fight and no other footprints at all. Why would 9 people flee their only shelter in a panic, leaving behind the very gear that could have saved them from the deadly cold? The first 2 bodies, Yuri Krivanishenko and Yuri Doroshenko, were found at the edge of the forest under a large cedar tree. They were stripped down to their underwear, their hands were burned and scraped raw, and the branches of the cedar tree above them were broken up to 15 feet high. It looked like one of them had frantically tried to climb it, maybe to get a look at the tent, or to escape from something on the ground. A small, makeshift fire pit was nearby, the embers long dead. 3 more bodies were found between that tree and the camp. Igor Yatlov, Zinaida Kolmogorova, and Rustem Solobuddin. They seem to have been desperately crawling back up the hill towards the tent. Their positions suggested one last, hopeless attempt to get back to safety. At this point, police investigators figured the cause of death for all five was hypothermia. It was a tragedy, sure, but it seemed straightforward enough. They got lost in a blizzard and froze, but the worst discoveries were still to come. 2 months later, after more snow had melted, the last four hikers were found in a snow den. They dug in a ravine, not far from the cedar tree, and their injuries made no sense at all. Nicholas Thibault Brinault had a massive skull fracture. Lyudmila Dubinin and Simon Zolotaryov had catastrophic chest trauma with multiple broken ribs. A medical examiner said the force needed to cause those injuries was like being hit by a car. But here's the truly shocking part. There was no major external wounds to match, no significant soft tissue damage. It was as if they'd been crushed by some immense, invisible pressure. And then there was the most gruesome detail of all. Lyudmila Dubinina was missing her tongue, her eyes, and parts of her lips. In fact, several of the bodies found in the ravine were also missing their eyes. The police investigation just got weirder from there. Some of the hikers' clothes tested positive for significant levels of radiation. Investigators had no explanation. There were no witnesses. The local Mansi police were initially suspects, but they were quickly cleared, and the evidence just didn't point to a human attack. Faced with a puzzle they couldn't solve, the Soviet government abruptly closed the investigation. The final report concluded that the hikers died from a compelling natural force. This incredibly vague answer only fueled decades of speculation, turning the Dyatlov Pass Incident into one of Russia's most enduring and terrifying true crime stories. For over 60 years, theories about this case have been all over the map, from secret military operations to something truly paranormal. We're going to get into the biggest ones. If you find yourself drawn to creepy, unsolved true crime stories like this one, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what we investigate next. What happened on that mountain? Let's look at the possibilities. One of the oldest theories is a military cover-up. The idea is that the hikers accidentally saw a secret Soviet weapons test. This might explain the strange orange spheres that other people reported seeing in the sky in that area around the same time. It could also explain the radiation on their clothes and why the government was so secretive about the case. Did the shockwave from the weapon cause their internal injuries and force them to flee? It's a powerful crime story, but there's no hard evidence. No crater was ever found, and the radiation levels were, while weird, weren't high enough to be lethal. Then you have the paranormal theories. Some have suggested the hikers were attacked by a menk, Siberian version of a yeti. This could explain the incredible force of the injuries and the pure terror that made them run for their lives. Others point to UFOs and aliens, citing those mysterious lights in the sky. These theories are fascinating, but without any physical proof like non-human footprints or debris, they're just speculation. For decades, these were the stories that defined the Dyatlov Pass Incident, a tragic mystery wrapped in Cold War, conspiracy, or a supernatural horror story. But in recent years, science has offered a new and maybe even more terrifying explanation, because it suggests the killer was the mountain itself. This leading scientific theory is all about a rare kind of avalanche called a slab avalanche. Here's how it likely went down. To shelter their tents from the wind, the hikers cut into the snow on the slope. They didn't know it, but the cut destabilized the slab of snow resting right above them. That night, powerful, gravity-driven winds, called katabatic winds, howled down the mountain. piling more and more snow onto the already weak spot. Then hours later, while the hikers were asleep, the slab fractured and slid. It wouldn't have been a huge roaring avalanche like you see in movies. It would have been a sudden heavy crushing block of snow landing right on their tent. This explains the internal injuries, the fractured skull and the broken ribs, without any major external wounds. It also explained why they cut the tent open from the inside. Pinned down by all that snow, unable to get to the entrance, slicing their way out would have been the only way to escape. In a state of pure panic, disorientated and in total darkness, they ran downhill towards the only landmark they could see, the tree line. Some were already badly hurt. Hypothermia would have set in fast, causing confusion and a bizarre phenomenon called paradoxal undressing. Freezing people feel intensely hot and start taking off their clothes. This explains why the first bodies found were in their underwear. The group probably split up. The ones who were still able made it to the ravine and dug a snow den for shelter, but they eventually died from their horrific injuries and the cold. The slab avalanche theory is the most complete explanation we have. It's backed up by modern physics and computer models, and it logically explains many of the most baffling parts of the case. The sliced tent, the missing clothes, and the brutal internal injuries without an obvious cause. And yet, some questions still linger. Can a relatively small avalanche really account for all those specific injuries? And what about the missing tongue and eyes? Investigators have suggested it was just natural decay and scavenging by small animals in the wet ravine, but for many, that feels too simple for a case this strange. The radiation is also an outlier, though some think it could have come from thorium gas mantles in the hikers' own lamps. The chilling mystery of the Dyatlov Pass Incident is a perfect storm of terrifying circumstance, a remote and unforgiving place, a series of bizarre and contradictory clues, and a group of young people whose lives were tragically cut short. While science has likely given us the answer, it hasn't totally erased the creepy sense of unease that hangs over Dead Mountain. We're left with a horrifying story of survival that became a desperate losing battle against an invisible, compelling and natural force. What we know for sure is that on that frozen night in 1959, 9 friends ran from their tents into a darkness from which they would never return, leaving behind a murder mystery that haunts us to this day.